Hi, I'm Kaylee Smith and today you join me here at Lindholme Lakes. We're on the Bonsai Lake today and I'm going to run you through 20 tips how to catch more silverfish on commercials at this time of year. So one of the important things to consider this time of year is line strength. I like to make my rigs on 013. This allows me to fish anything down to an 010 hook length, which is all balanced nicely through. So ground bait plays a massive part in winter fishing. Getting it right can be the key thing. End of autumn, beginning of winter, I still like to fish dark fish meal, so this is a high fish meal content, but as it gets a little bit colder I like to scale it down. This is where the F1 Dark and the Pro Fatchers comes in. F1 Dark has no fish meal content in it, so if I don't want any, I put that in on its own, and then I can limit the amount of fatchers I add to it depending on how much fish meal, depending on the weather. So the warmer it is, the more fatchers I'll add to the Dark F1, and the colder it is, I'll cut it out and sometimes just fish Dark F1 on its own. So the consistency that you mix your ground bait is also important this time of year. I like to do mine the night before and then put it in the fridge overnight and then play about with it in the morning. I like it so when I give it a little squeeze, it nips together, but then it's easy enough just to break up. Sometimes I like to feed it loose, which just pushes into the bottom of the cup. As soon as it comes out of the cup, it opens up, leaving a nice little spread on the floor. So how you start your swims this time of year can be mega important. I like to start off with bit of ground bait about that size, lightly squeeze with, as you can see, there's literally just the odd maggot and pellet in. Fish that out, and when the bites start running out, I'll then top up with a little nugget, which is the size of like a 2p piece. If you just keep introducing bits of bait that size, it'll keep your peg ticking over, and when you can control how much you put in, little bits are always better this time of year. So now the water's cooled down a bit, the fish aren't quite fighting as hard. This allows us to use lighter elastics. Today I've opted to fish a 9 Duraslip and a 7 Duraslip. These are both mega soft on the strike but power up, enabling us to catch everything that swims, so they're good for skimmers, but if we want to hook a F1 or carp, which are mega important this time of year, it gives it the backbone to get everything out and powers up when we need it the most. So I've fished a lot of type of these venues over the years. And one thing that stands out, which is mega important, is using a light float. I like to fish a 4x10s F1 maggots for maggot fishing and a 4x10s F1 pellet for pellet fishing. Usually I don't like to go much higher than a 4x12s, and I will sometimes drop down to the 3x Chanty when fishing maggots through the water. Really light, you just want that slow fall and it's more likely to grab their attention and get more bites this time of year. So the two go-to shotting patterns that I use when I'm fishing pellets, I like to fish a strung bulk with number 10s. This allows the bait to sit on the bottom, but any slight indications you can see and strike. And for my maggot fishing, I like to fish it tapered, also with number 10s. This allows you to hold onto the float and let the bait fall really slowly through your peg, and you get most of the bites just as it hits the bottom. So when you arrive at a peg sometimes it can be a bit daunting and there's a lot of options to go at, and deciding where to fish can be a hard choice. So the way that I look at it is, if I have the islands in front of me, these will be patrol routes for all fish, not just carp and F1s. You will catch silvers to them as well. I like to have a couple of lines at 11 metres and a short line just to trickle bait on. I'll be able to rotate these lines and keep fish coming throughout the day, and on the short line I look to catch bigger fish there later on. So feeding options. As I've already explained, I've got these 3 main lines on the go and they're all fed completely different. The one to my left I've fed with loose ground bait with a few maggots, and I'm catapulting maggots over the top. The one to the right I've introduced a little nugget of ground bait and left it alone. And the short line I've put a little bit of ground bait there and then loose fed casters over the top. All these lines will play a different role during the day. So the one to the left is the main line. The one to the right I keep dropping on and catching the odd big skimmer, and the one to the left's going to come spot on later on. So on this short pole line, I've opted to fish casters out of my hand. This gives me a bit of a spread and enables me to lay my rigging around the baited area. Sometimes the bigger skimmers and F1s will sit off the feed. This enables me to catch them sort of fish. You normally expect this line later on in the session to get stronger and stronger, and you can end up putting big weights together with these sort of fish. So the way it's gone, the swim to my left has produced the most fish, but the swim to the right, I've literally dropped 2 little nuggets on there all day, but I can always guarantee when I go on that line I will catch 1 or 2 skimmers, not fed anything else or topped up, but it always guarantees a couple of fish. So if I ever need to rest my other line, or if I'm getting finicky indications, it gives me a chance for me to go somewhere else in the swim, which I know that I might get the few bites off. So because I've been loose feeding casters on the left hand side, this has a tendency to bring fish off the bottom. So it's always worth having a shallow rig set up in your armoury. You might not pick it up, but some days if you're getting finicky indications, it's always worth laying that rig in, and it could just keep going under every time, putting more fish in your net. So this is especially the case where venues where there's lots of hide and roach, such as the Oaks, do very well there on the shallow rigs. So timing's just like carp fishing in summer, it's mega important when you're fishing for silvers in winter. I like to have a main line that'll keep me ticking over, have a line that I'm going to use to rest it and keep catching the odd fish on that. But this short line later on in the session, just as you are with carp fishing, that's where you're looking to build up quite a big weight of fish later on. So that's usually the case for venues such as here at Lindholme and Holcroft. The bigger skimmers are usually sat closer in, and you usually catch them in the last hour or so of the session, but they can be mega weight builders. So it's mega important to work your rig when you're maggot fishing. It's all right just laying it in and sitting there, but if it's not moving, you're not helping the case by not moving the rig yourself. I like to lay it in, give it about a minute. If you haven't had a bite, lift it out, relay it. Because you're catapulting maggots and the maggots are falling through the water, you're trying to imitate this by laying your rig in. It's also worth flicking your rig past. Just keep working, the harder you work, the more bites you'll produce. So these days it's becoming more and more popular to fish for commercial silvers. It's not like when fishing pellets for F1s in summer where you've got to have it dead depth, just touching bottom. You can be a bit more aggressive with these fish. You can put a bit more line on bottom, so when you do get a bite, you know there's one on. When you're fishing maggots, I can have like 2 to 3 inches on bottom, pellets mainly 1 inch. This just helps with stability, keeps the rig stable and it don't move. Any indications, you can strike it and there's usually a fish on. If there is any tow, just put a little bit more line on deck, so when you're holding on, your bait's still stable on the bottom. So as much as we love F1s and they're great weight builders and we like catching them, they can also be a right pain in the backside. When they come in, they can upset your peg. You just don't know how much bait they've eaten and how much you have to refeed. So sometimes it's nice to catch them, get them out of the way, and then settle down and get into your skimmers and your silverfish fishing. You will catch the odd one, but initially they move in, clear you out, do what they've got to do, and then you get on with catching what you want to catch. So if your swim does go quiet every now and then, don't panic, you haven't done anything to upset them. It's probably the F1s coming in. Just leave them to it, and before you know it, you'll be back catching fish. Cad pots are mega, especially on commercials, but this time of year, when you're fishing for silvers, the only time that I'm really going to use them is when I'm pellet fishing. Every other time I like to pick up a catty and put a bit of bait in. The only time you want it tight in a little spot is when you're pellet fishing, just so the fish can home in and the first thing they see is your pellet. So weight building fish on commercials are mega important. I'm not talking about these big bream that you're going to catch short later on. What about the bread and butter fish, the roach and the little skimmers? Sometimes you can get a bit annoyed with these and think, oh, I want to find a bigger fish. But when they're 4 or 5 ounce a piece, you're only looking at 3 or 4 to pound. And if you think over time, the amount of fish you're putting in your net, ridiculous amount of times I've lifted it out at the end and there's been miles more than what I thought, just because I've carried on catching fish. A big tip on this is whenever you're catching in winter, is carry on doing what you're doing. Don't go searching the peg for bigger fish. If they're in the area, they will come along where you're catching fish. So one thing that I see the most, especially like I help on the talent pathway and things, pleasure anglers, you see that the float is out quite a lot. They have a lot of bristle showing, especially this time of year. You need it dotted down to a pimple. The bites are next to nothing, literally just get a dink and fish are on. Mega important to dot your float right down. Any indication you get, strike. What I like to do is I add number 12 or 13 stots. This enables me to take shot off or add them on, and you can get it spot on just so you're fishing as a pimple and every indication you can strike it. So as you might have guessed, I'm quite a busy angler and I like to keep everything rotating and going. There's no point just sitting on one line if you're not catching on it. If you're catching on it, fair enough, but I still like to keep my other lines topped up. I'll have the odd drop on the line to the right and make sure there's still fish there, and if not, add a bit of bait. I don't like to put all my eggs in one basket, so I always like a backup line in case one dies or you get a carp come in and eats all your bait or you lose a fish. It's best having backups, keep rotating and keep yourself busy this winter. So it's nothing new, but pellets can be an awesome bait for both carp, F1s and silvers. The way I like to go about feeding it, I like to put a little pound full of about 20-30 micros in at the start with the odd 4mm in there. And then I like to have a mixture of hook bait size 4mm and 2mm pro expanders. Perfect, just keep rotating between a 4 and 2mm. Sometimes a couple of 2mm is by far the best bait. But on some days, pellets are all that silvers want to eat, so why not fish them?